Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Selamat pagi. We are delighted to welcome you to the second International Conference on Multidisciplinary Academic Studies, or ICoMUS 2023, with the theme Innovation Challenges in Multidisciplinary Research and Practice. A very warm welcome to us all present at Universitas Terbuka Convention Center. And my name is Trixie, and it's an honor for me to be your MC on this momentous occasion. Before we begin, I would like to greet Rector of Universitas Terbuka, Professor Ojat Darojat, MBus PhD, Head of Senate Academic, Professor Hanif Nurholis, MSI, Vice Rectors of Universitas Terbuka, Head of Institute of Research and Community Services, Professor Dewi Artati Padmo, Putri MA PhD, Directors of UT Regional Offices, Deans of Universitas Terbuka, Head of Research and Scientific Center, Dr. Eti Puji Lestari, SE MSI, Chairman of the Organizing Committee, Ibu Made Yudi Setiani, PhD, our distinguished speakers, Professor Thomas Luce, PhD, Professor Miyata Sachiko, PhD, and Professor Daryono, SHMA, PhD, as well as our moderators, presenters, participants, and distinguished guests. Ladies and gentlemen, ICoMUS is organized by the Scientific Research Center, Institute of Research and Community Services of Universitas Terbuka, which provides a forum for academicians and professionals from a variety of academic fields and disciplines to discuss the challenges to create innovation in multidisciplinary research and practices. It delivers the opportunity to exchange knowledge and information, build professional or research relationships, and connect international partners for future collaboration. ICoMUS 2023 include Business and Management, Social Sciences, Education, and Science and Technology as its scope. To officially start this event, I would like to invite everyone to be upstanding for the national anthem, Indonesia Raya. Thank you. Please be seated. Now, to add more colors to this event, we have a special cultural presentation that will surely mesmerize you all. Please give a round of applause for Saman Dance.
Dengan bismillah awailun pupun lun lake ampun segala dosa, segala puja hamwa ke Allah, ke Rasulullah, salam sejahtera. Salam Nabi kan sunan najara tamuman asyaran mulia mulia riranum lampuan hai mulia rakan nama mesuara Allah karena salam Nabi kan sunan najara tamuman syarat mulia mulia riranum lampuan mulia rekan mame suara amin Allah semua amin. Berkat rahmat Allah yang berinang Aceh Mamu sejahtera. Berkat rahmat Allah yang berinang Aceh Mamu sejahtera. Allah putingan jangan aku dengan amise hantam mata combeti kamu salah putingan janggut aku dengan mise Allah putingan jangan aku dengan amise hantam tak combeti kamu salah putingan jangan aku dengan mise matanya. Hai putih tulang lon di dalam jerat. Hai mantan ingat keguna yang kau. Allah lembukan lisan yang acur bangun kalah badai. Jipun angin lewat terama timpa. Hai pada karubah salam pemuda. Hai kamu kadubah telah berguna. Hai dengarlah kisah, nama dengarlah kisah. Di langit bintang, di langit bintang, di bumi pada boleh nak teglai, boleh teglai, boleh asal. Di langit bintang, di bumi pada boleh nak teglai, boleh asal. Amabayan jidang acir putra kekema kekalan cice macera tarupa. Hai rekaran manan siu mamirang akan lamana. Siu mamirang siu akan lamana. Pula berawa jika dua nataja abenang rau daya rau tajaga. Mang mayang ke mang wahati mang lelam nanya puja ke Tuhan. Rangan malam besangan luang. Ci Allahu Rabbi Allahumma lam dunia inanya letak salahan. Tinggal sembahyang dengan puasa. Allahumma lam dunia inanya letak salahan. Tinggal sembahyang dengan puasa. Umat lam dunia letak salahan. Tinggal sembahyang dengan puasa. Tinggal sembahyang dengan puasa. Tinggal sembahyang.
Another round of applause for Saman Dance, presented by Dharma Karya Senior High School. Saman dance originated from province of Aceh, Indonesia, or also known as the dance of 1,000 hands, with a captivating display of harmony, rhythm, and unity, reflecting the strong cultural heritage and deep sense of community that we all embrace. Ladies and gentlemen, as the host of the conference, we will now hear a report from the chairman of the organizing committee. Please welcome to the podium, Ibu Made Yudi Setiani, PhD.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan, Rahayu. Good morning and best wishes to you all. The Honorable Rector of Universitas Terbuka, Professor Ojat Darojat, PhD, the Head of Senate Academic, Professor Hanif Nurholis, distinguished keynote and panel speakers, Professor Thomas Frederick Luce from Claremont Graduate University, USA, Professor Sachiko Miyata from Ritsumeikan University, Japan, Professor Daryono from Universitas Terbuka Indonesia, Vice Rectors, Deans and Vice Deans, Head of Centers, Offices and Units, Head of Study Programs, presenters and participants of the ICoMUS 2023. Good morning. Welcome to the second International Conference on Multidisciplinary Academic Studies, or ICoMUS 2023 at Universitas Convention Center, Universitas Terbuka Convention Center. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as the chair of the ICoMUS Committee 2023, I would like to extend my warmest welcome to all guests and attendees of this conference. This conference is the continuation of the previous annual international conference held by the Center of Scientific Research in the Institute of Research and Community Services. This year, the theme of the conference is Innovation Challenges in Multidisciplinary Research and Practices. This conference is being held on site at the Universitas Terbuka Convention Center and the Universitas Terbuka YouTube channel, or UTTV. Therefore, allow me to welcome both online and offline participants. Honorable ladies and gentlemen, today multidisciplinary research is considered the driver of innovation and research. We live in the fast-changing world with complex, interdependent systems and subsystems, and today's knowledge of landscape has powerful drives for multidisciplinary research. Through collaboration, researchers from different academic disciplines can produce quality research and publications. However, collaboration and multidisciplinary research face challenges in creating innovation. To discuss this innovation and challenges, the committee of the Second International Conference on Multidisciplinary Academic Studies 2023 chose the theme of Innovation Challenges in Multidisciplinary Research and Practices with 4 main categories: business and management, social sciences, education, and science and technology. Distinguished guests, at this conference, we will conduct discussions with speakers from Claremont Graduate University, United States of America, Ritsumeikan University, Japan, and Universitas Terbuka Indonesia. Later in the afternoon, we will conduct parallel sessions with several presentations from 3 countries, namely India, Turkey, and Indonesia. The presenters are lecturers, researchers, practitioners, and students from various institutions such as Universitas Jember, IPB University, Universitas Muhammadiyah Malang, Universitas Dianapura, Universitas Pajajaran, Universitas Negeri Jakarta, Universitas Abdurrab, Universitas Nusa Bangsa, and Universitas Terbuka. The full paper presented in this conference will be published in the conference proceedings. Finally, we would like to express our deepest appreciation and gratitude to all committee members and other parties who have contributed their thoughts, time, and energy to this conference. We hope that the second ICoMUS will benefit and contribute to multidisciplinary research. May this conference be productive and assist us all with our future in the force. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Santi 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 Om.
Thank you very much, Ibu Madeyudi, for the remarkable journey of organizing this conference. Now it is my pleasure to invite the head of Institute of Research and Community Services of Universitas Terbuka to deliver a welcoming remark. Please welcome to the podium Professor Dewi Artati Padmo Putri, MA, PhD.
Selamat pagi. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan, Rahayu. Good morning, very good morning, and best wishes to you all. The Honorable Rector of Universitas Terbuka, Professor Ojat Darojat, MBus PhD, the Chair of the Senate of Universitas Terbuka, distinguished keynote and panel speaker, Professor Dr. Thomas Lucier from the Claremont Graduate University, USA, Professor Sachiko Miyata from Ritsumeikan University, Japan, Professor Daryono from Universitas Terbuka Indonesia, Vice Rector, Deans and Vice Deans, Heads of Centers, Offices, Units, Heads of Study Programs, presenter and also participant of the second ICoMUS 2023. Welcome to the second International Conference on the Multidisciplinary Academic Studies, or we call it ICoMUS 2023. I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to all speakers, presenters, and participants attending this conference. This annual international conference is held by the Center of the Scientific Research of the Institute of Research and Community Services, Universitas Terbuka, to support the implementation of research and publication by lecturers and students. This is the embodiment of the vision and mission of the Institute of Research and Community Services, which aim to improve the productivity of scientific publication in qualified national and international journals to attain the intellectual property rights and improve the research collaboration with national and also international institutions. This is the basic underlying principle of the International Conference of the Multidisciplinary Academic Studies. Ladies and gentlemen, the second International Conference on the Multidisciplinary Academic Studies 2023 adopted the themes of innovation challenges in multidisciplinary research and practices. The scope of this conference includes business and management, social science, education, science and technology. This scope has been chosen because the Institute of Research and Community Services focuses not on one science, but rather on the multidisciplinary science with various of study programs. Multidisciplinary research has become the trademark of the ICoMUS in relation to the mission of the Institute of Research and Community Services of Universitas Terbuka, which aim to improve collaboration in research and publication by academic members inside and outside Universitas Terbuka. We hope that the ICoMUS 2023 will promote interest in collaboration research among all academics members and contribute to improving the number of publications. We believe that this conference will become the medium for all speakers, presenters, and participants to share thought and develop new ideas. Finally, I would like to convey my sincere gratitude and appreciation to the organizing committee who did the outstanding job in hosting this event. We wish you all a very pleasant and productive conference. So I hope you enjoy the conference, and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Professor Dewi, for the warm welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, we are deeply honored to have with us today the Rector of Universitas Terbuka who will deliver an opening remark. Please welcome to the podium Professor Ojat Darojat, MBus, PhD.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi dan salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan. Rahayu, rahayu, rahayu. So, very good morning everyone. The Honorable Keynote and panel speakers, Professor Thomas Lusai from Claremont Graduate University, USA. Thank you for your coming. I just remember, very long time ago, maybe around 2005, myself and also Professor Ati Suwarman and Ms. Dharmayanti traveling to Florida State University, your university at the time. And I just remember at the time, this is very sweetest memory in my life. When I eat alligator. This is my first time eating alligator at the time. So myself, Prof. Atwi, and others Indonesian team Decentralized Basic Education, DBE, I just said, just like word, alligator dimakan buaya. Alligator was eaten by buaya, crocodile. And this is very fun of memory in my life. Professor Sachiko from Miyata, Retsu Minkang University in Japan. I also have a good memory when I visit Tokyo Gokukei University. It is just like university for teachers in Tokyo. And Professor Daryono from Terbuka Indonesia, Vice Rectors, the Head of Senate Academic UT, and then Head of Center Office, Unit, Head of Study Program, presenters, and all participants of the second ICoMUS 2023. Praise be to Allah, the Almighty, for His blessings, which allow us all to meet in person and virtually in good health to attend and participate in the second interconference on multidisciplinary academic studies organized by the Center of Scientific Research and Institute for Research and Community Services. On behalf of UT, I would like to express my sincere gratitude and appreciations to the speakers from Claremont Graduate University, Prof. Lusai, and also from Retsu Minkang University, Mexico, and also for Prof. Daryono, for their willingness, your willingness to speak at this conference. I'm confident that the knowledge you share will benefit us, including academics and the wider community in general. So, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the advancement of the world technology and civilizations has impacted multi-sectoral complexity issues which are interrelated. Therefore, these issues cannot be solved with a single scientific method or approach. Rather, they require a combination of various disciplines and approaches. Research activities requires multidisciplinary approaches to yield a broader spectrum of benefits. A multidisciplinary approach is an effort to integrate various perspectives in solving a problem, which can be solved through collaborations. Collaborating and networking at the national and international level represents the basic competencies of researchers and are the norm and working performance and research professionalism. So allowing researchers to compete in the international community. With the conference theme of innovations, challenges in multidisciplinary research and practices, we hope that UT can facilitate a forum for academic and professional from all fields and academic disciplines to discuss research innovations, challenges, solutions, and provide opportunities to exchange knowledge and information, develop professional and research relations, and connect international partners for future collaborations. Honorable ladies and gentlemen, the International Conference on Multidisciplinary Academic Studies 2023, which is held by the Institute of Research and Community Services for the second time, is a major forum for lecturers and students to present their research based on various international skills and experience and improve the quality of publications measured by the key performance indicator of the university. This conference presents speakers who share their knowledge, experience, spirit, and inspirations in the effort to develop future research. Moreover, I would like to extend my gratitude to the Center of Scientific Research of the Institute of Research and Community Services, UT, for organizing and holding the second International Conference on Multidisciplinary Academic Studies 2023. I believe that this event will help us raise our effort to develop our research activities in the future. And the conference will promote innovations in multidisciplinary research. In addition, allow me to convey my appreciation to all lecturers and students participating in this international conference. I hope more lecturers and students will participate in the future, inshallah. So please enjoy the conference. May Allah the Almighty bless us. Finally, with Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, the second International Conference on Multidisciplinary Academic Studies 2023 is officially open. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Professor Ojat Derojat. Please kindly remain on the stage as we will now proceed to have a photo session. For that, I invite to the stage the Head of Senate Academic, Vice Rectors of Universitas Terbuka, Head of Institute of Research and Community Services, Head of Research and Scientific Center, Chairman of the Organizing Committee, and our distinguished speakers to have a photo session at the stage. To our photographer. Okay, please give your best smile. Thank you very much. You may please return to your seat. Ladies and gentlemen, we finally reached the moment that we all have been eagerly waiting for. It is with great pleasure that I welcome Professor Thomas Luce, PhD from Claremont Graduate University, United States of America, to deliver a keynote address.
It's terima kasih. Unfortunately, that's the end of the Bahasa Indonesia that I know. It's a real pleasure to be here in Indonesia again. This is the first time in 13 years. As Pak Ujat mentioned, I was at Florida State University for 4 years, and during that time, I had an opportunity to travel here to Universitas Terbuka 7 times, and I made many excellent friends. I had an opportunity to learn a little bit of Bahasa Indonesia, and then we had, I came here 7 times with my colleague, Dr. Mike Spector, who's now at the University of North Texas. And we did many workshops here. We engaged in some collaborative research with faculty from Universitas Terbuka. I made many friends and colleagues, and then some of those friends came to Florida State University to do their masters and PhDs, and now they are all leaders here at Universitas Terbuka. Now in 2010, I moved to California to escape the alligators to Claremont Graduate University, and one of the colleagues that I met while I was here at Universitas Terbuka came to study at Claremont Graduate University, and that's Dr. Dickey, who I believe is here in the audience, I hope. So, as I mentioned, this is the first time I've been in Indonesia for 13 years. It's wonderful to be back. It really is. It's in this conference, I think, is a great opportunity for us to talk about collaboration and to talk about multidisciplinarity. So I want to thank Ibu Yudi and the organizing committee for inviting me. I want to thank all of Universitas Terbuka for being such wonderful hosts all those times that I came. And thank you once again. Unfortunately, I forgot all of the Bahasa Indonesia that I knew except for terima kasih and nasi goreng. So maybe I'll learn it again. So if I could bring up my PowerPoint presentation. So today I think the theme of the conference is really important, multidisciplinarity. So what I'll talk about today is overcoming innovation challenges in multidisciplinary educational research and practice. And in specific educational research, because my field is education, and really my field of education is inherently multidisciplinary because we have economists, sociologists, anthropologists, psychologists working on educational problems in their research, and yet research in education is not always multidisciplinary. Often sociologists are working together or anthropologists are working together. So this theme of multidisciplinarity is really important. So what I'd like to start off with is to talk about sort of some definitional issues. What is multidisciplinarity? What is interdisciplinarity? And I'd like to introduce a term, transdisciplinarity, that's really important in my university, at Claremont Graduate University. Then I'll talk a little bit. I think we all believe that multidisciplinarity is important, but I'll provide a couple reasons why I think it's important. And then I'll talk, of course, even though it's important, it's not easy to do. So I'll talk about a few challenges to innovation in multidisciplinary research and practice. I'd like to talk about one example from practice, actually, because that's the theme of the conference. It's not just research, it's also practice. And then I'd like to give 3 ideas for overcoming innovation challenges in multidisciplinary research and practice. 3 examples, one from research, one from practice, and one from a more institutional perspective. And then I will conclude. So what are these terms multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and transdisciplinary? Of course, many researchers use these terms interchangeably, and many times they don't recognize differences across them. But in fact, there are a few differences in terms of what they represent. So multidisciplinary comes from the Latin term multis, or many. So it means many disciplines engaging in an activity, but separate but working together, having separate identities but working together. Interdisciplinary comes from the Latin term inter, or among, or reciprocal. And in interdisciplinary research, the disciplines are interacting reciprocally. They might be overlapping, exchanging ideas, but maintaining their separate identities nonetheless. And then in transdisciplinarity, trans comes from the Latin trans, which means across, through, or beyond. Means transcending or going across, through, and beyond individual disciplines. And so this difference will become important when I talk about transdisciplinarity at my university in the United States. So this figure, if that didn't make a lot of sense, this figure from Cook et al.'s article about different types of disciplinarity might help to shed light, a little bit of light, might help to clarify a little bit. So if we see on the left, that figure on the left, I'm not sure if you can see the pointer, multidisciplinarity represents disciplines working together in a similar space, but keeping separate and maintaining separate identities. In the middle, we have interdisciplinarity, in which the disciplines are overlapping and exchanging ideas or exchanging methods, but nonetheless, they still maintain separate identities, sort of like international, in which individual nations maintain their identities. And then finally, on the right, we see transdisciplinarity, in which the disciplines are not just overlapping, but they're actually kind of combining to form something new, a new sort of discipline in which they've kind of lost their disciplinary boundaries. They've crossed boundaries to create something new. So that's transdisciplinarity. So I'll get back to this idea in a little while, but first I want to start by talking about the benefits of multidisciplinary research and practice. And of course, we know there are many benefits, and that's why we hold this conference, ICoMUS, to talk about multidisciplinary research. So one is to broaden perspectives and tools. By working with others from different disciplines, we learn about different theoretical frameworks, different literatures, and different methodological tools. We can innovate methodologically and theoretically, working with other disciplines to create new knowledge. And again, innovation is the theme of this conference, so that's obviously important. And we can help to solve wicked problems. And the term wicked problems comes from the field of design, which in itself is sort of multidisciplinary. And it refers to problems that involve multiple interacting systems, complex systems in which the solutions and the causes are not always totally clear, in which the problems themselves might have pernicious effects on society, such as homelessness, such as climate change. Even death might be considered a wicked problem. And of course, there are personal benefits to multidisciplinary educational research and practice, multidisciplinary research and practice. And these include learning new things, collaborating with new friends, with new colleagues, expanding our networks, and getting new opportunities for research and practice. Of course, there are challenges, and if there weren't challenges, we would all be doing multidisciplinary research. Now, on the right, what you see is a photo of grain silos in the state of Texas in the United States. And so we use this term silos to represent separate disciplines working in separate spaces. So, as in the grain silos in which the grain is separate, the corn might be separate from wheat, and they do not mix. Many times in academia, we have different disciplines that are working separately, even in the same campus. So, for example, I did my PhD at Stanford University. And Stanford University is actually divided, the campus, into one side that's known as the techie side, and that's where the science, technology, engineering, and math departments and schools are. And then the other side of the campus is known as the fuzzy side, and that's sort of the arts and humanities and the social sciences. And as a result of these different disciplinary boundaries, and the different disciplines have different terminology, different methodologies, different outcomes that they're interested in, that leads to difficulties in communication and collaboration. So just the mere fact that we're separate geographically from our colleagues in different disciplines makes it difficult for us to engage in multidisciplinary innovation. Another is just the idea of the lack of incentives. There often aren't the same incentives to conduct multidisciplinary research and practice as there are for more disciplinarily focused research. For example, the most prestigious journals like Science and Nature are really focused on single or sets of disciplines. Many times publications, publications as well as grants are more focused on disciplinary teams and disciplinary research. And what that leads to is disciplinary inertia. In other words, we just keep doing the same thing, we keep following the status quo, and we don't have a catalyst to conduct multidisciplinary research or practice. So I have 3 ideas, or kind of 3 recommendations for how we can overcome challenges in multidisciplinary research and practice. The first is to invest time and effort in creating multidisciplinary mixed method research collaborations, really to invest not just in the collaborations, but in the relationships, in the friendships that underlie those collaborations. And I'll give an example from current research that I'm engaged in. The second is to recognize and seize the multidisciplinary moments. And what I mean by multidisciplinary moments are moments when it's clear that one discipline alone cannot solve a problem and that we need to join forces with other disciplines in order to innovate. And finally, create institutional supports and incentives for multidisciplinary work, because those first 2 things won't be completely effective until we're able to support new research and new practice with incentives and other types of institutional supports. So the first example is I want to talk about a research project that I'm currently engaged in with 2 colleagues, and the title of the project is Understanding Marginalized Youth's Secondary Education Experiences, a mixed method study of Colombia, India, and Malawi. So I'm working on this project collaboratively with 2 colleagues, Dr. Amita Chugar from Michigan State University, and Dr. Nancy Kendall from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. You can see on the right, that's our logo, which was designed by my daughter, Linda, who's now 19 years old. Pa Ujat met when I think she was about 4 years old. And this project is supported with funding from the Spencer Foundation, with a Lyle Spencer Research Grant. So the context in which we are doing this research is a global push toward relevant secondary education for all. If you look at these graphs on the right-hand side, these come from the UNESCO's Global Education Monitoring Report from 2021 to 2022. What you can see in those black lines at the top, on the left-hand side is the number of out-of-school aged children that has dropped over time. In the middle is the number of out-of-school adolescents who are lower secondary school age, and on the right are out-of-school youth who are in upper secondary school age. What you can see is on the left, the number of children out of school of primary age has fallen dramatically, especially from 2000 to 2010, and then has kind of stagnated. In the middle, the number of out-of-school adolescents has also fallen, but on the right, you can see the number of out-of-school youth has not fallen as much, and it's pretty stagnant. So that's a real problem in terms of getting youth into upper secondary school. And as a result, there are still 195 million adolescents and youth who are out of school in 2019. So there's a growing emphasis globally on getting secondary-aged youth into school. But not only is there an emphasis to get them into school, there's an emphasis to provide relevant secondary education for them. So the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 4 is related to education, and target 4.1 of the Sustainable Development Goals is to ensure that all girls and boys complete free, equitable, and quality primary and secondary education, leading to relevant and effective learning outcomes. But that raises a question, and that's the question that we're examining with our project. What is relevant secondary schooling for youth in marginalized environments? Often when we read in the literature or in international reports about relevant secondary education, it often refers to skills for the formal labor market. In other words, getting youth the things that they need to know to be employed after graduating from secondary school. But there are a couple of problems with this conceptualization or this definition. And one of them is it doesn't address the many inequities that limit youth's access to formal labor markets in marginalized environments. So, for example, there may not be a formal labor market in many environments in which youth are going to secondary school. And more importantly, this idea of relevance that comes from the global literature does not consider youth's own experiences, aspirations, and needs. So what we really believe is important, my colleagues and I, is that this concept of relevance will soon be infused with meaning by a few powerful global stakeholders without the voice of youth informing what relevance means in secondary education. So these are our research questions. We have 3 sets of research questions organized around the objective of to understand and make visible marginalized youth schooling experiences, needs, and aspirations to inform improved global and national secondary education discourses, policies, and practices. So we have research questions around global and national definitions and institutional practices, understanding marginalized youth experiences, and developing a youth-informed discourse of relevance. And these are our study sites. So we've chosen 3 countries that we have some familiarity with, and in each country, and those are Colombia, India, and Malawi. In each country, we've chosen an urban center and an outlying rural area in which there are different types of marginalization that youth must face. In Colombia, there's been a long history. We're studying the city of Medellin, where there's been a long city of conflict as a result of civil war and civil conflict over more than 50 years. In Malawi, we're studying the city of Blantyre, which is the most rapidly urbanizing place on earth, where youth often must face not only rapid urbanization, but being orphaned as a result of the AIDS crisis in sub-Saharan Africa. And in Chennai, in India, there's youth are facing the problem of migration to urban centers as a result of drought and agrarian communities. So we're looking at these questions in each of these 3 countries, and then we're using mixed methods and collaboration across disciplines to understand these problems that youth are facing. So our research design is multi-sided, as I mentioned. We're studying urban and rural areas in each of these countries. It's a multi-year project. We're following youth over time. It's mixed methods when we're using both qualitative and quantitative methods to understand educational experiences in these 3 countries. We begin a transition into non-compulsory secondary school. In other words, youth are now in school not as a result of a legal requirement, but because they want to be there or their families want them to be there. In Malawi and India, that's 9th grade, and we follow them into 10th grade. In Colombia, that's 10th grade, and we follow them into 11th grade. We explore variation across urban and rural sites, and so we're engaging in a number of different methodological techniques. Our data sources include documents, literature, qualitative fieldwork, including interviews, focus group discussions, observations of classrooms, 2 rounds of quantitative surveys in each country. So we just not too long ago finished the 2nd round of quantitative survey application in each of these 3 countries. And the iterative collection and analysis of qualitative and quantitative data. And so what I mean by this is you can see this is a diagram that shows our research design, our mixed methods research design. At the top, you see that we have first analysis of literature, which informs interviews at the very top, interviews of national and international officials. Those then inform on the left the qualitative research, which includes interviews, focus group discussions, observations, and then to the right, that informs the first round of our quantitative survey, which then informs a 2nd round of qualitative fieldwork, which then builds into a 2nd round of quantitative fieldwork, and then further qualitative fieldwork. And so what have we learned from this project so far? Now, not surprisingly, COVID had a really disruptive effect on this research project. We started in the field in January 2020 in Colombia, and we almost immediately had to interrupt our data collection because of the pandemic. But ultimately, we were able to get back to data collection, and these are some of the things that we've learned so far. COVID-19 has disproportionately impacted children and youth in marginalized environments in terms of not just being out of school, but also in terms of what they're learning and their learning environments. In many marginalized environments, schooling can provide a protective environment for youth. And when youth lost this protective environment during the pandemic, when they were out of school, in many cases, the consequences were very dire. And as an example, in the urban school that we're studying in Medellin, Colombia, 2 of the students in the school lost their lives during the pandemic as a result of losing this protective environment of schooling. Another common finding across these countries is that youth across the globe must often cope with high-stakes testing regimes that affect their current schooling experiences and their future plans. So a lot of time and energy are devoted to preparing students to take these tests that have consequences for both their in-school experiences and after school. And finally, youth across these 3 countries consider their schooling opportunities to be highly relevant to their current and future experiences. Even though they have challenges, even though there are often problems or difficulties like having to deal with high-stakes exams, youth, and this insight comes from our survey data collection, across the 3 countries and over time really find their schooling experiences to be quite relevant, not just for their current experiences, but also for their future. Now, what are some lessons learned, and how does this tie back into multidisciplinary research? What you see on the right is our research team, just in Colombia. To my left in the pictures, my colleague, Dr. Nancy Kendall, and the other researchers are in the photo are part of our Colombian research team. In each country, we have 2 in-country researchers, research consultants who are working with us, and we also have a large survey team. So what we've learned is strong friendships can result in strong research collaborations. So this collaboration I have with Dr. Tudgar and Dr. Kendall goes back many years to my graduate school experience, in which we were friends and often worked on class assignments together. Multidisciplinary mixed methods research provides additional perspectives to help solve wicked problems. So those insights that we're gathering about youth across the globe could not be gathered just from qualitative or quantitative research alone or from a single disciplinary perspective. But one challenge and one thing to note about multidisciplinary mixed method research is that it often requires large and diverse teams. As you can see on the right, that's just our Colombia team. We have similar teams in India and Malawi. So it takes resources. So the second example I'd like to give is from practice. And it's to recognize and seize multidisciplinary moments. And again, what I mean by a multidisciplinary moment is a moment in which you recognize, okay, one approach or one single discipline cannot solve this problem. So I'd like to give an example from educational practice in rural Indonesian schools. When I was coming here regularly to Universitas Terbuka, one problem I learned about in that the trainers of teachers were having to support teachers was the challenge of large multi-grade classes. So there were teachers who were working in classes with multiple grades, but with very large classes, maybe 60 students in a class. And this is a very complex and difficult problem. And so the instructors at Universitas Terbuka told me about this problem, and I was very curious about it. So we actually visited some rural schools, and this is what I found at the time. Now this was around 2008. But to start, because in educational practice, it's difficult to think about what is a discipline. What do we mean by discipline when we're talking about teaching and learning in classrooms? And so you might think about curricular philosophies or instructional approaches, but really as a former teacher, before I became a professor and went to get my PhD, I was a teacher in primary and secondary school. And one thing I noticed is that teachers really appear to divide themselves, at least in the United States, according to either levels, primary, secondary level, or grade level, or subjects. In secondary schools, they often divide themselves by subjects. So the history and social science teachers might be over here working together, planning, teaching together, even socializing, whereas the science and math teachers might be over here. At the primary level, often teachers separate by grade levels. So for example, first grade teachers might consider themselves to be specialists in early literacy, developing early literacy, or socializing children to school, where upper grade teachers like 5th and 6th grade teachers consider themselves specialists in science or math or history. So to the extent that teachers are collaborating across grade levels, and this is something that at least in the United States is rare, I see that as a type of multidisciplinary practice in that they're combining and they're interacting across grade levels and learning new things. So When I see multi-grade teaching, I think of this as a type of multidisciplinarity in educational practice. So what is multi-grade teaching? Teaching in a class with students from 2 or more grades, often making use of flexible grouping of students by age, grade, or academic level. Students might be working collaboratively even though they're in different grade levels or at different skill levels. But really the emphasis is on collaboration and cooperation. And it's multi-grade schooling across the world is really actually quite common in remote rural schools due to the lack of teachers, the lack of students to do individual graded classrooms. It's extremely complex teaching. I've had a few opportunities to teach primary school at different grade levels combined in a classroom. It's extremely complex and really takes a lot of skill and a lot of training in order to do well. And in fact, it can represent a multidisciplinary moment if teachers recognize the value of combining grades and being flexible in their instruction. So the most famous, I think, model of multi-grade teaching is Colombia's Escuela Nueva, which means new school multi-grade model, which was founded in 1975 for rural multi-grade schools because at the time there were many remote schools with only maybe 10 students in a school with grades 1 through 6. It provides curricular supports for teachers and students. You can see on the right, children are organized around tables. They're working together. They're looking at learning materials or learning guides, and they're really collaborating and cooperating. The teacher is not standing in front of the classroom lecturing. The teacher is circulating and working individually with students or with groups. It's very cooperative and student-centered. And there's a lot of evidence of a positive impact on the model on cognitive and non-cognitive skills, especially peaceful interaction of children, which is a very important outcome in the context of Colombia. So when I came to the Universitas Terbuka in about 2008, I heard about this challenge of teachers working with large multi-grade classes. And so I was really curious what this looked like. So we actually went out and visited some schools. And at the time, this may have changed, but at the time, often the multi-grade schools had many students, sometimes as many as 60 students in a single classroom. Many schools were located in remote rural areas beyond the reach of most teacher training institutions. And here, Universitas Terbuka had an advantage in reaching these students because of their distance education model. But there were still a lot of teachers who felt like they needed more preparation to teach in these complex environments. Teachers often received insufficient training to teach in these multi-grade classrooms. And there were also multiple conceptions of multi-grade teaching as either a temporary solution if, for example, a teacher was missing in a given day. They would divide that teacher's class across different classrooms, and then the new classrooms would involve multi-grade teaching, but also as a long-term solution when there were not enough teachers or students for single-graded classrooms. So I was really curious about this. So my colleague, Dr. Ida Zubaida, who's here in the audience, conducted a study, which we ultimately published in the Asia-Pacific Journal of Education. And we had 3 basic research questions to understand these teachers in multi-grade schools. What are the conditions and training needs of teachers in these schools? Are these needs met by the teacher training institutions that serve them? Is there a common model? If there's insufficient training, does that mean that each teacher kind of comes up with their own model of multi-grade teaching? So some of the findings were really quite interesting. Teachers reported that they received insufficient training to manage and teach large multi-grade classrooms, this very complex endeavor. The practices and perspectives varied widely across the 9 schools in the same rural district. So even though these schools were not too far apart, the way that teachers approached this complex problem were very different across these schools. And most teachers with multi-grade classes maintained a rigid separation of grades due to age, content, size of classes, and preparation for exams. So they were very reluctant to have the students working together across grade levels. In other words, they were really reluctant to see sort of a multidisciplinary, multi-grade moment. And some comments to illustrate these findings. One of the teachers said, I usually send 1/2 of my class outside so I can focus on the others, but this is a big problem with the rain. So if I have 60 students, I need to send 30 out so I can focus on the other 30, but what if it rains? They can't be outside, I have 60 students in my classroom. We put up a curtain between the 3rd and 4th grade students so that they will not do common activities. So even though the students were in the same classroom, the teachers really insisted that they be separate. So in one case, we even saw a teacher with a wall between, who built a wall in between the different graded classrooms. We talked to a teacher who actually taught 2 different classrooms in different locations, who taught 3rd and 7th grade and had to run between classes. But we also did find a few teachers who were collaborating and working with other teachers to plan activities and teach their classes and to have more of a multi-grade or multidisciplinary approach to this problem of multi-grade classes. And so there was one teacher in particular that I was very fascinated with. I was really struck by how innovative this teacher was, especially considering the few resources she had in her school, which were really just, she had a blackboard, a chalkboard, and she had the students themselves. So this teacher, I was standing in the back of her classroom, called up 3 students to the front of the class. And this was a lesson she was doing together with her 3rd and 4th grade students. And as you can see in the photo, there was one student who's kind of on shorter side, one with medium height, and one who is a taller student. So I said to my colleague, is she teaching about height? And my colleague said, no, she's teaching about symmetry. And I said, symmetry? How is this lesson about symmetry? And she said, well, you see the student, there's a student with a symmetrical part in the middle of her hair, a student with an asymmetrical part on the side of her hair, and then a student with curly hair who has no discernible part. And so that's how the students were understanding symmetry. And in fact, the students, there were about 50 3rd and 4th grade students in that classroom, and we're all following along attentively and really seemed to understand this concept of symmetry as taught by this teacher. And this teacher also did work collaboratively across the grades, was kind of doing a multidisciplinary, multi-grade teaching. And so I got a chance to interview this teacher and really learned a lot from her. And so the lessons learned from this experience are that one innovative person can recognize and act on a multidisciplinary moment to overcome disciplinary boundaries. But without institutional support, this innovation may be limited. So as you can see in these photos, even though this teacher was working in a multi-grade fashion and having students work collaboratively, the students were still separated, 3rd graders on the left and 4th graders on the right. And so what she lacked was kind of support to have students working together more collaboratively across the grade levels. And so that brings me to my last lesson, or my last example. And that's the transdisciplinary work that we're doing at Claremont Graduate University. Because at CGU, we really do have support and incentives for transdisciplinary work. So our model of transdisciplinarity, as you can see on the right, we have a complex problem at the center, maybe a wicked problem. We have different disciplines working together around that complex problem that's important to society. All these problems that we work on are, of course, important and have real practical, real-world implications. We include diverse stakeholders working together toward a resolution of that problem, both from different disciplines, from academia, and from outside of academia. We engage in disciplinary self-reflection, in which each of the disciplines thinks about what they're contributing and what they're learning from the collaboration. And we develop innovative approaches emerging from the collaborative process. And in terms of what are the supports that we have for this transdisciplinary focus, we actually received a large endowment or a grant many years ago to foster university-wide transdisciplinarity. We have courses, and transdisciplinary courses. We have grants to develop those courses. We also have student research grants to conduct transdisciplinary research. We've developed more than 80 transdisciplinary courses, and all of our PhD students must take at least one transdisciplinary course before they graduate with their PhDs. We recently developed an MA in Transdisciplinary Studies, and we house the STEAM Journal, which is a transdisciplinary journal. STEAM, if you're not familiar with the term, is an intersection of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, with the arts. And so it's a true transdisciplinary endeavor to combine sort of the techie side with the fuzzy side in terms of using the terminology at Stanford University. And so just as an example, this past year we gave 16 awards known as Crossing Boundaries Transdisciplinary Student Research Awards to students across the schools, across information systems and technology, across arts and humanities, across behavioral and social sciences, and across education, as well as community and global health. And you can see these are the 16 grants that we gave, and they involve students working on really difficult transdisciplinary sorts of problems. You might call them wicked problems. We also in the past year gave 10 transdisciplinary research, dissertation research grants that support students doing transdisciplinary research, and ultimately to solve problems, but also to help build a greater body of transdisciplinary research to solve the wicked problems that await us in the future and that are facing us even now. So to conclude, I'd like to say that, just to summarize, multidisciplinarity offers great potential for creating new knowledge, innovating, and solving wicked problems like relevance of secondary education or teaching large multi-grade classrooms. Disciplinary boundaries and lack of incentives can often get in the way of innovation and multidisciplinarity. Approaches to overcome these challenges include investments in collaboration, recognition of multidisciplinary moments, and institutional support and incentives. And finally, events like ICoMUS provide an excellent opportunity to engage in this important work. Terima kasih.
Thank you very much, Professor Thomas Luce, for sharing your invaluable insights and knowledge with us. Please kindly stay on the podium. We would like to present a token of appreciation for sharing your expertise in this session. And to present the ceremonial gift, we would kindly invite the Rector of Universitas Terbuka, the Head of Institute of Research and Community Services, the Conference Chair, the Organizing Committee, and also the Head of Research and Scientific Center. We can gather together for a photo session. Okay, give your best smile. Thank you very much. Distinguished guests, presenters, participants, ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to our next agenda, which is the plenary session, followed by question and answer session. This session will be moderated by our moderator, Bapak Martino Wibowo, PhD. Before we begin the plenary session, please allow me to read a brief CV of our moderator today. Bapak Martino Wibowo, PhD, an Indonesian citizen living in Jakarta, graduated PhD from the National Institute Development Administration, Bangkok, Thailand. He is currently working as a permanent lecturer and head of the doctor program in management at Universitas Terbuka. He is experienced internationally in the world of practitioners and academics, focusing on ASEAN innovation management in finance, microfinance, and risk management. Now I would like to welcome Bapak Martino Wibowo, PhD, to the stage.
Thank you, Ms. Trixie, for your warm, nice introduction. Well, a very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to you all, my excellency, honorable guests, speakers, presenters, and participants on the second international conference on Multidisciplinary Academics Study 2023. Or so-called ICoMUS. Here, as I mentioned by the Master of Ceremony, let me introduce my name. My name is Tino. I'm coming from Doctorate Degree of Management. And let me please to bring this session with you, Professor Sachiko and Professor Daryono. Thank you for being here. I'm so glad, I'm so delightful today to present myself here as a moderator. So for this plenary session, we will have two lectures. There will be two plenary sessions. For the first plenary session, delivered by Professor Miyata Sachiko, PhD. She is a professor from Ritsumeikan University, Japan. Then the second plenary session will be delivered by our professor, Professor Dr. Daryono, SIMA, PhD. Okay, and then thank you so much for having you here, both of you professors, Professor Sachiko and Professor Daryono. And please allow me again to greet our speakers here. We are very grateful that all of you are able to give a live presentation today, and we wish all you in the good health. To our distinguished speaker, Professor Sachiko and Daryono, please give me applause and welcome Prof. Sachiko and Prof. Daryono. Please give me applause to them. Okay, before we go ahead, one note for the audience before we are coming to the first lecture. Please prepare the questions and also please get into the Q&A session that will be held after the end of each plenary session, and you can raise questions after the moderator guided and announced for the procedure. And don't forget to put your identity in the questions and to whom the question is asked for. Okay, now we have first lecture for the first plenary session from Professor Miyata Sachiko. So Professor, let me read your CV first, your resume first. So I will read for a brief. Professor Miyata Sachiko was graduated from one of top reputable university in Tokyo, Arts and Science, winner of Japan Society for Promotion of Science, GSPS, and also Rotary Foundation International Award. Professor in College of Business Administration, Graduate School of Ritsumeikan University. Also, she is internationally affiliated with and several associations in Japan and European countries, and has many lots of research outcome. She focusing on business management, especially in development microeconomics, applied microeconomics, Asian economy, and she is get on with Indonesian culture actually. Yeah, she is quite familiar with Indonesian business and economics context. So, without further ado, we can join this session, and for the time and place is yours, Professor Sachiko.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the nice introduction, and thank you for inviting me for this opportunity. May I have my PowerPoint shown on the screen? Thank you. So, Professor Tom has nicely introduced about multidisciplinary research, and for me, I was requested to talk from the perspective of economics in general, but I'll try to include innovative side as well as the challenges and then how it evolved in the recent years, as well as in some of the examples from practices. Okay, so my topic is going to be, I'm by education mainly educated in international social sciences, so my background actually is coming from multidisciplinary environment with my other colleagues were mainly also from different discipline, but I learned mainly, my focus is on development economics, mainly particularly in applied micro development economics. So to go to practice element, I'm actually, before the resume shown from 2012, prior to coming back to academia, I was working actually in several international development organizations, including African Development Bank and World Bank and International Food Policy Research Institute. So that you can imagine that being on the ground as closely working together with the practitioners, I always wanted to, or forced me to think how the research can be applied in practice and be useful for policy implications. So today, the topic is economic development, inequality, and poverty reduction, where I did some research. I'm not that growth expert, but those three subjects that used to be separately dealt with evolved over to be done jointly in recent years. So that's where I would like to talk about. So before I start that topic, I did a little bit of research of your Universitas Terbuka to see what kind of faculties you have. And I noticed 4 different faculties. And in fact, my research area really is a combination of different areas, which you can see many from social sciences, but also a little bit on technology adoption, which might also relate to your area in science and technology. And I did also a bit of work with using GIS or Geographical Information System data. So the multidisciplinary does not have to be between different faculties. It can also happen within your area. And I believe that this topic, the list of my research topics, partly because I was in a different organization, but also partly because I was very curious to keep learning different new field and work with different multidisciplinary research teams. So you can relate that I have development issues, poverty assessment, and growth, which I will talk about today. But also contract farming is part of the business contract in agricultural business. And education and skill mismatch, which also relates to Tom's talk earlier. But this one I will talk about tomorrow in Faculty of Economics. And also policy effect, because I was in the international multi-donor organization, you really have to see whether your project has a policy impact. So I had always the policy effect in mind. And gender, technology adoption, these are part of my ongoing and the continued research from before. Part of the things that I would say here is that the multidisciplinary research is also encouraged in my university in Ritsmekan. So if you have a research team, not only within your discipline or faculty, but you have a research jointly with economics or science, you are able to apply for a bigger research grant. So there are some incentive within my university or with the Ministry of Education in Japan, in the government as well as at the university level, trying to promote the multidisciplinary research. Okay, so going to the just a little bit about background, why I chose this topic. The development economics, maybe some of you are well aware. It used to be in my time when I was a student. Some professor kind of said it is a little bit minor because it doesn't really have big faculty members, or it doesn't have theoretical many theoretical ideas within the textbooks, but that is up until 2019, as you all know, that the Nobel Prize was awarded to Daflo, Banerjee, and Kremer, who has been awarded for their experimental approach to alleviating global poverty. So this was part of a real lessons that we development economists learned, that academics should not be in silos, as Tom referred, but to be on the ground, to work with actual policymakers together. So development economics, especially micro development economics, has suddenly become the mainstream in economics in recent years. And a lot of students want to study this subject. And what they have also emphasized is that the evidence-based policy making. So before that, okay, academics would have very sophisticated technical empirical analysis along with data sets and results, but the policymakers did not really use it or did not really know how to apply it in a real practice. But now with this, researchers, academics always keep this in mind. We have a lot of research that is on the ground working with the policymakers. I think Indonesia and UT is pioneer in this because you already have a great collaboration with policymakers and then with a multidisciplinary research team. So JPAL was developed as a global research center working to reduce poverty really on the ground. by ensuring policy is informed by scientific evidence. So this is the trend now. Along with this, various methodologies were innovated, such as econometric tools. Recently, there are much more survey experiment and behavioral economics tools that is incorporated in development issues or research. So that is a multidisciplinary approach in itself. And so further, the multidisciplinary nature in applied economics or micro-development economics, especially in my field, it is multidisciplinary because if you are not using secondary data, field survey, you go to the field and you interact with people in collecting primary data. Psychology experiment has become a very standard, or laboratory experiment is combined in surveys. The SDG element, the development goals, environmental and technology in farming or fishery activities is related because you are utilizing natural resources. And other data set like satellite night light imagery, like you can see here in Japan. You see that the many activities are concentrated on certain areas, and we can use this satellite imagery as the activities density, for example. So going to the economic growth and poverty and inequality, these three topics were separately measured in the past. But how can we understand if growth is also benefiting the poor population in a country? So that's kind of the message and the example I'm going to give today. So the concept, because this was separately considered and we didn't know what's going on inside the growth in the international organization, well, you might already know this concept, but we started to develop the concept of inclusive growth or pro-poor growth that is mainly defined within the research department of the bank or a bank, and various measures along with it has been developed. So today I will talk about growth, the general growth, and then inequality and poverty, but at the end, all of this together combined called growth incidence curve. I will introduce some examples. So SDGs are one of the main topics that we also always cover in my courses. And you can see that today's topics cover poverty issue, education issues, because I will touch a little bit about the world's education trend, and also about growth, and finally about inequalities. So several topics of SDGs are also covered, which already showing a multidisciplinary element. So questions and topics at first: how did world economy and inequality grow? What do you think? What kind of image do you have? And then what caused the economic growth of this long-term growth that we are seeing? And then after that, what about poverty and inequality trend? So there's a quiz. If I have a time, I would like to interact, but just imagine in your note or in your head, please imagine what kind of shape the graph looked like over the last 400 years or so of the world, the whole world, not just US or Europe or Indonesia, the whole world, GDP per capita in the world. So the big hint is, so starting from 1600, by 2000 we had the per capita, which is per person GDP, about $6,500 US. So from this, how does it look like? When I do this in my class, there are various shapes, and then it's always interesting, but because of the time, I'll give you the answer right away. In fact, we don't have the actual data, so there are two economists that did the actual simulation. So the graph looks absolutely flat up until 1900 and only begin to see the growth in 1900 and really real steep curve only begin to see after 1950. So you can recognize by looking at this graph that the growth that we are talking about is really only happening in the last 50 to 100 years. And this is the similar graph shape you can see. It is only taking United Kingdom with the longer span from 1200s, and the last bit of 50 years or less than 100 years, the GDP grow more than 29 times, which is quite tremendous compared to the long, very, very slow growth. So why is that? What are the determinants? Well, one of the main determinants that is often combined to discuss with this growth is that you can see the population aligned with this graph. So on the horizontal axis, you see the population size, which starting from 2 million onwards, and then on the bottom is the GDP per capita, the upper graph is total GDP. You can see when UK had a very serious pest pandemic, worse than the COVID-19, I believe, they lost almost half of their whole population in 3 years, in the 14th century. As you can see, in the bottom middle of the upper graph, the total GDP, when they 8 million or so, suddenly reduced down to 3 million or 4 million. You see the GDP slightly stagnating. But once this pandemic was over, you start to see the gradual growth along with the population growth. So it is really hand in hand, and then the rest follows. So some economists argue that the population growth really is a part of growth of the population growth. Population growth. The economic growth is along with the population growth. So that is the snapshot of brief growth, how it looked like. Now, what about poverty? What is the poverty measured, and what does it look like? So there are various versions of definitions of poverty. So today I'm just gonna introduce one that is very standard, that is absolute poverty or extreme poverty, which gradually shifted from 0.56 per person per day that person need for surviving a very basic needs. So absolute poverty now is defined those who are living under $1.9 per day per person. So this is the graph that looked like since 1990. As you can see, we had nearly 2 billion of those who are under extreme poverty, but over this span of until 2019, the top runner is really the East Asia and Pacific that has nearly made all the extreme poverty gone. And also South Asia has successfully halved the poverty. But on the other hand, Sub-Saharan Africa has not been very successful in reducing extreme poverty. And regionally, you can also see the poverty map. By 2019, most of the Asian used to have a very red and then a high incidence of poverty, but now you see most of them are greener, which means that the percentage of poverty incidence, people living in extreme poverty, is very low, but some pink and red parts are more or mostly concentrated on Sub-Saharan Africa. In terms of inequality, distribution of domestic income can be quite unequal within each country. So now we see this graph on the very left-hand side, the population share. The dark gray represents the most richest 10% population in your country. And then the red 10% represents the bottom poorest population. As you can see, the most, even at the most equal countries or the middle class, majority of the middle class in Japan or Sweden still has 20% of the wealth or income is received by the top 10%. The worst is around nearly 50% in South Africa, Central Africa, and Brazil, where nearly 50% of the wealth or the income goes to the top 10% of the richest, whereas the bottom 10% only receives 1% or maximum 5% of the whole national income. What about the trend in 100 years? So on the left-hand side, some countries like United States and UK had the top 1% of the population receiving 20% of the whole country's income. Now they successfully once reduced down to half, between 5 to 10%, but now is back again to 20% over. Whereas on the right-hand side, we have some welfare system rich countries that have successfully reduced this inequality of 20 to 25% of the wealth going to the top 1%, now reduced to 5 to 10%. Now, I'm not claiming that the whole country is more equal, but this is one sample of showing a part of the inequality trend. And there are other inequality measurements, like in education, gender, labor. I'm just going to introduce one in education. Here you see on the left-hand side the average years of education. This is to show a lot of graphs so that you know what the actual numbers look like. So it used to be in the 1870s that even the richest countries or the more advanced OECD countries only had 1 to 4 years of average education, had jumped to 10 to 14 years. And all the other emerging countries like China and India is also catching up quite fast from nearly zero now at the same point around 6 to 8 years. Now I tried to find Indonesia on the right-hand side. I'm sorry, it's a little bit difficult to find, but Indonesia is also catching up fast to around approximately 8 years. So another element in seeing the education is whether the person, how the percentage of literate or illiterate. You can see in 1800, the majority of the world's population were actually illiterate, 90%. And for 100 years, you can see we made a progress of reducing 10% to about 80%. But the real success comes after the 1900 to the rest of the graph to really reduce the illiterate number of population to literate down to about 10%. So now 90% of the world population are literate. Now remember the growth, economic growth, global growth graph. Do you notice something that when the real economic growth accelerated, this graph has some kind of relationship that you can probably remember to link. So people were trying to find out whether the growth of the global economy or each country and the poverty or the inequality, the relationship, how is it? In the past, it was separately estimated, but in some international organization, we tried to develop some tools or methods. And one of it is now widely used, which is called growth incidence curve, developed by the economists who are now retired from the World Bank, by Ravalian and Chen. And this has been used, let me probably explain what it is. So the growth incidence curve looked like this. This is an ideal shape. The vertical axis is, so you need 2 years of consumption or income in one country or region to compare the level, right? So the growth, the left-hand side axis is the growth rate of this 2 point in time in income or expenditure or the data, whatever you have about wealth. And on the horizontal axis, you see the percentile of the population ranked by household expenditure per person. So you rank everybody in your country from 0, the bottom poorest, to the richest who has the income, and see how the growth has been between these two periods. So this is between 2000 and 2007, which I'll come back to that. This is an Indonesian example. So with this methodology, we were able to see whether the growth of these two years goes to the richest, the middle, or the poor, or on average. Because if we are looking only at the average, we only see the average at the country level. So we really wanted to see how. And looking back on the literature, existing literature in China, between 90 and 1999, upward sloping over all quantiles, but despite rising inequality, poverty incidence fell no matter where the poverty line was drawn. So they were successful in reducing poverty everywhere. And when you look at, but when you limit to some ranges, like in 93 to 96, you will see the graph just that I showed you, that it is pro-poor, which means that the poorer population had more growth than the richer quantiles of the population. And there are many other country studies. So here, finally, I will just try to introduce you my study that I did with Professor Akita. This is published in the area, which is East Asia and Research Institute of Asia and ASEAN and East Asian countries. So some of the research questions were to combine with development economics with regional science element to see the regional diversity as well. So did urban and rural economic growth benefit the poor more than the rich? Or to what extent was urban-rural economic growth poor, or whether it was not? And then other questions. So we separated, because Indonesia is so huge, we separated the region into 5 areas. And so start with most regions' inequality, how it was. You can see from this, sorry, it's a little bit small, the Indonesia at the top as a country, the inequality increased. Although on the left-hand side, the poverty incidence actually substantially reduced successfully. And by regions, you can also see in all separate regions, most of them have reduced poverty substantially, but the inequality increased in most areas, and especially in urban areas, except in Bali, is rural areas. So this is part of the growth incidence curve. You can see the rising inequality as we saw, but economic growth benefited overall between 2004 and 2014 in this 10-year period, unfortunately, is more not inclusive, which means that the richer population increased more than the poorer population in terms of the growth. The unique graph that we can find is in East Asia, where you see in rural areas, you see a little bit, a part of it is a slightly proper. We don't call it real proper because the vertical line of mean income is not surpassed. So it is still below the average, but you still see that the higher growth rate was enjoyed more, the bottom 20% of the population had higher growth than the middle, between 20 to 50% of the population. So this is overall in the region, but you can see some differences in that from Sumatra to Kalimantan, you see the lower and the upper bracket had a little bit different shape than the other areas. So by combining the regional element to just looking at the country as a whole, you can start to learn some differences. And so that was an unfortunate story, but if you change the timing of, this is another study done by another researcher, you can see that if you change the timing of it, so 1993 to 97 is not pro-poor on the left-hand side, but the right-hand side between 2000, the longer span and recent 2000 to 2007, you see that the poorest population growth is much higher than the highest population, which is below the average. And this was a very poor, inclusive growth that you can find. And so they have done a very good job in really strengthening the poverty out from, especially in the bottom part. And this probably coincides with a lot of projects and evaluations that was really reflecting the real world poor population, along with a lot of government programs like community development projects. So sustainability, inclusive growth, and SDGs can also be connected. Because of the time, I will skip some of this. So to conclude, we saw various measures of indicators separately, starting with economic growth, inequality, and poverty. But with some new innovative tools and technologies, and also looking at combining different regions, the subjects, you can start to see variations, and you can create a new research, empirical research based on that. So economic growth that we found is a relatively very recent phenomenon. We all talk about growth, but our long history tells us that it was really slow growth unless we had a industrial revolution or other population growth. The distribution of income within country varies a lot from country to country. And the actual extreme poverty was reduced, or years of education and literacy really improved substantially, but the real inequality within the country actually, unfortunately, increased in many countries, especially including in Asia. Inclusive growth was trying to capture whether these growth were really going to the poorer population. And we were able to see some growth in the poorer population in the case of Indonesia. So questions for potential discussion. Will country be able to grow sustainably as it is? As you saw, a very steep curve, but now we have a lot of global challenges. Should government aim for continued growth? There is a concept of small economy, or simplifying a small world, simple life that doesn't always look for growth. How can a country growth be more inclusive? And what kind of multidisciplinary research topic or approach that can combine from other areas? These questions can further lead in your afternoon panel session. I saw some topics that are related to economic, but not only that, but you combine with the growth, migration, or payment system, and then ICT and education. So, okay, so finally I have this feedback that you If you could please appreciate, and then thank you for your attention.
Okay. Please give applause to Professor Sachiko for the presentation. So, thank you so much indeed, Professor Sachiko. Domo arigato. Terima kasih. Okay, next, it is time, ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. Now, after this first plenary session, now it turns to the second session, will be delivered by Professor Daryono. I'm so delighted. Welcome Professor Daryono to deliver the next maximum 30 minutes from now for your presentation. Time is yours, Professor. Please give applause again to our Professor.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Very good morning to all of you, distinguished keynote speaker, my lecturer as well, Professor Tom Luce, and also my colleagues, Professor Miyata here, all of distinguished speakers, presenters, and participants. I would like to first thanks to the committee for inviting me on this such a great conference on ICoMUS, multidisciplinary academic studies. Thank you for the chair for giving me about 30 minutes, but I think my presentation is quite overlap with Professor Tom and Professor Miyata as well. So it's already been mentioned by both of them. So I may not be used for the 30 minutes probably. Okay. Everyone, I think for more than 30 years I've been experiencing on multidisciplinary perspective. And thank you, Professor Luce, for bringing up the practice. I think rather than discussing about what is the multidisciplinary, sometimes we just, what they call, we embed on a multidisciplinary itself, even sometimes we doesn't recognize it. So this is part of our practice that I'm working on during the 30 years experience. My background was law, so it's quite strange actually, but it's quite it's quite unique at the ANU, because law at the ANU is not a single-minded black law legal approach. Law in ANU was under we call as a College of Law, Security and Defense Studies. So there are a number of the multidisciplinary studies under the College of Law. This one of my first experience on dealing with the multidisciplinary studies, especially during my thesis writing. So even my thesis writing about law, but actually at that time my supervisor urged me, and the faculty members also urged me you have to escalate your topics into wider perspective, not only law. So that's I think because I do believe that law is not only what is the rules, but the law is also how it works. So the working of law actually is not only about the system of rule. It's the influence of the multi-factors and also multi-factors. So that's what I'm interested in multidisciplinary approach, even in one quite narrow-minded the law. Okay, thank you. I think this is part of the reasons why I'm interested in using multidisciplinary approach related to solving a complex problem. And I think Professor Miyata and Professor Luce already mentioned the complex problem. Sorry, I think. Okay, I'm going to talk about the briefly historical perspective on a multidisciplinary approach. I think Prof. Tam already discuss a bit, and then narrative about what, why, and how, and also Professor Tom already mentioned as well. And the challenge, opportunities, and this is the case study that I would like to share to all of you about the advancing the access and equity to higher educations through use of the open and distance educations. It's funded by the European Unions and Erasmus+. Let's start from the first one about, the historical perspective. Okay, I think so I cannot see that one. Okay, okay, that one. Yeah, thanks. I think so. I was anxious at that time. How is the multidisciplinary perspective started? So I asked the generative AI for helping me. Then that's very good. It's quite nice. This milestones. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, there are a number of the milestones, but I skip it because it's quite, I think it's not quite important for us. So started from the Industrial Revolutions in the 19th century, and then because the Industrial Revolution is the beginning of the science, the development of the science. At that time, the science have grown very rapidly, including specializations at that times. Then moving to the early 20th century, the inventions of the nuclear energy. So I think it's coming up to your minds, right? When there's a nuclear energy, it's always come up with the Hiroshima and Nagasaki incidents about the atomic bomb. And then the next, due to the use of the fuel cell and industrializations, there is a great concern, a global concern related to the global climate change. This is part of the stages of the milestone related to the multidisciplinary approach. And the last would be digital revolutions. I haven't had an idea yet about what is the end of the digital revolutions. But my assumptions, there will be more even interconnected with the disciplines. The problem even more complex in the future. So this requires multidisciplinary approach to solve the complex problem. Sorry. Yeah, I just call to two landmark in a multidisciplinary approach. During the nuclear inventions, so I think the Manhattan Project is one of the atomic bombs, but now the energy, the nuclear energy has been reused and repurposed into a quite diverse purpose of human life, including the energy security, water security, food security, even in health. So we can imagine, from the one's perspective, during the times in chemistry and I think science and chemistry, basically, because the reaction of the atoms. But now the nuclear energy can be used into quite wide use of purposes. And the second landmark of the digital revolutions, I think we are now in this era, in the digital, and we are going to experience this. This part of the why we are unable to see the discipline on only one single monodiscipline, because it's interconnected with all of the aspect of a human life. Yeah, I'm going to go to the what, the narrative about the what, why, and how, but I just want to just highlight it about the Prof. Lucy mentioned earlier. So basically, the multidisciplinary research is the integration of the knowledge, tools, techniques from the multiple disciplines. And the next phrase is very important too, to solve a complex problem. Problem now, a social problem now is interconnected. We are unable to disentangle problem of the social into parts. It's always becoming one part of the whole complex problem. Yeah. So it involves collaboration between researchers in different fields, such as everyone. Then it's essential for addressing the complex issues that require diverse, different set of scale and perspective. Yeah, what actually we are facing now, the problem that exists now. The UN member states already declare, as Professor also Miyata mentioned, about the World Global Sustainable Development Goals. This addressing the real problem that now is facing by all of the nations. So it seems that it's not only multidisciplinary approach that we are going to use, but it's beyond the jurisdictions, beyond the nations, and even beyond the territory. So there will be 17 major problems that we have to encounter to solve a real complex problem of the world. Professor Miyata already mentioned about the poverty. Sorry. Professor Miyata giving an example on an economic perspective to look at on how the growth. But the poverty itself actually is not only can be solved by an economic perspective. The poverty is sometimes in mind of the people. We have to change the behavior of the people in order to eradicate the poverty. This is the essence of the sociology and anthropology. So this is why the Sustainable Development Goals require multidisciplinary approach in order to solve this complex problem. About last year, I think last year the UNESCO conducted a global survey to assess what is actually the real problem that facing by the world in the next 2030. Then there are 4 top global challenges regarding the world problems, including the climate change and the loss of the biodiversity. Violence and conflict. The third one will be discriminations and inequality. And the last, lack of food, water, and housing. You can imagine, do you think it can be solved by a real one disciplines? So I think we may think ourselves that this kind of problem is unable to be solved by one discipline. For example, food security. It cannot be solved by only a food science. There need to be an agriculture productivity as well. And also there need to be a regulatory framework, how to secure the agriculture product could be delivered or could be used or even could be a benefit to all of us. So this is part of how the multidisciplinary research is imperative for all of us. So we need to go beyond now our disciplines. And if I'm reflecting about 20 years ago, when I was, 15 years ago when I was studying at the ANU, they already have this kind of perspective. But in Indonesia, I think we are left behind on this kind of what the university, what the science have to solve the complex problem. But I'm not sure how the US university now, the governance of the US university or even in the Japanese. Why it's important, the multidisciplinary research? Because it's breaking the barrier. This is the problem. The problem of the university is a barrier between discipline. So the multidisciplinary research is breaking this kind of barrier. We work together, we come together, we communicate together, collaborate together, and solve the complex problem. This the power of the multidisciplinary research is of breaking the barrier. And another important thing that the multidisciplinary research is focusing more on society impact. Society impact. What is the impact to the society? I think that's important. Okay, I would like to share with the case study that the teams of the UT is part of the collaborative research projects on the advancing equity and access to higher educations. So responding to the SDGs 4, 5, and 10 related to the educations and inequality. So 8 universities developed 3 years multidisciplinary research project on building university knowledge for all. We call as BUKA. BUKA in Bahasa Indonesia is open. So we hope that at the end of the project, we are more open. Open from any kind of what they call as any kind of feedback, any kind of disciplinary approach, or even any kind of commentary that need to be sustained to follow our research result. So we are all at DCU. DCU is a Dublin City University, a temporary university, Wawasan, OUM, Universitas Buka. The Indonesian partner is UNP, and then Open University of the Philippines, and the Mindanao State University. So this is the 8 members of the Buka who are working together and who are sitting together, communicating together, and it's from various different fields, various different disciplines. Yeah, when we discover about 6 major issues that we encounter in developing world. The first about the instructional design, student success, learning platform, learning design, licensing, and digital access. And it was quite fortunate at the times because we are also in the midst of the what they call as COVID-19, where all of the instruction have to be online. So this is quite fortunate for these projects because we are forced to use the online instructions and also the online support system for fostering the student success. Yeah. So with the 6 problems, then we come up with the also the 6 solutions. So in an instructional design, we consider that we are adopting ABC learning designs that is discovered by the UCL, University of College London. So the ABC learning design is quite simple and it's easy to implement it. So if you're interested in looking at what kind of ABC learning designs, so please visit the UCL ABC learning design. And then for the student success, we are also discovering about the use and the importance of the learning analytics to predict and also to assist students to their learning progress. This is very important for predicting and assisting students because during the onlines, students usually are overwhelmed with the instruction and also with the assignment. So with the learning analytics, it helps students to see whether they are fail or not. So if they are in the area of potential to the failure, then institution or university have to take actions. The third discoveries would be we are also developing offline and online learning platform. In the Asian countries, most of us, Malaysia, Philippines, and Indonesia, encounter about the about the quality of the internet. So this is the issues when we need to create the offline and online learning platform in order to fight the internet stability. If the area has not been served by quality of the internet, then they are using the offline learning platform rather than online. The next will be inclusive learning. Yeah, I think so. We also discovered that the quality of the internet, even some of the area already served by the 5G, but most of the area are still using the 3G. This is the issues that we use inclusive in order to serve our students better. So rather than using the video for 15 minutes, then we cut the video into parts, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, in order to secure the bandwidth. So this is part of design on inclusive. And on the fifth would be open licensing. Yeah, it's in line with our first thought related to the PUCA, open. So this the open licensing is part of the discovery that we need, that all of the educational materials have to be open to public. So the licensing that need a regulatory framework and a policy framework in order to secure that the knowledge have to be accessible for the publics. And the last would be a digital access point. We noticed that quite many of the area, including in Indonesia, large part are still in what they call as without the area that without reliable internet. We call it as it's a blank spot. So this is part of the how we create a digital access point for the students or for the persons who are living in a blank spot area. Yeah, this is my this is our projects. Actually, we discovered we call it as an UT access. UT access means access to UT for the online support services for students without reliable internet. So this is the example of the internet coverage in West Java. West Java is quite close to the Jakarta. You can imagine in Jakarta itself, it's not far from Jakarta. The red dot, the red area, it's served by the internet. But the black area, sorry, the white area, it doesn't serve by the internet. So you can see quite a huge area in the southern part of the Jakarta are still blank spot. It's not far from capital city of Jakarta. We can imagine how about the island on the northern part of the islands, on the eastern, even in the eastern part of the Indonesia. So this is the problems that we encounter. So attrition rate, we have a quite number of the attrition rate. Our assumptions, attrition is related to the proximity. So when we develop a tools to connect between students and the university or the institutions, then the proximity would be closer. So this is part of the why the attrition is high, because the proximity of the students and the institution may not be quite properly settled. This is quite similar to how the proximal distance between you and your boyfriend or girlfriend. If you are not maintained your proximity, then you lost your boyfriend, you lost your girlfriend, right? The students over there, okay? So this is quite similar to if you not maintain the proximity between students and the institutions, then we may lose the students as well. Wide ranges of the internet quality, as I mentioned earlier, this one affected to the third one, the digital literacy divide between urban and the rural. Yeah, this is part of our objective to develop the inclusive learning designs and to develop local cellular network, as we call as a OT access. We are using research and development stages for our projects. At first, we did a need and infrastructure analysis in the targeted area in the southern part of the West Java, and then after we are gathering and collecting the need and the infrastructure analysis, we develop a pilot, the UT access and also the inclusive learning design. After developing a pilot, then we are testing the pilot to the 5 different locations of our targeted area. Then we receive a feedback from the pilot's testing. Then we redo again and redevelop the pilots, and then we establish and we install the revised pilot on the targeted area. Then we did a capacity buildings. This is another important one, the capacity buildings, because if we deliver the technology, if we deliver the tools without capacity building, and it's useless. So the capacity building is quite important on this projects. And then the last will be the evaluations. This year, it's on the stage of the evaluations, but we hope that we can scaling up our projects into the other area of the Indonesia. This is our systems of the OT access system designs. Basically, we are installing the wireless access point to our students, and then students will have the access to the OT access free with the coverage of about 2 kilometers wide. So sometimes it's depending on the terrains. If in the hilly mountains, then would be lesser than 2 kilometers square. Yeah, what have we learned from the multidisciplinary research among 8 universities? It's quite lucky and fortunate for all of us because we are given more diverse comparative understandings between Indonesia, Philippines, Malaysia, and of course in Europe. And we also have more creative adaptations. Because in some area, this kind of things might not be implemented well due to some things, due to the constraint of some things, but in the other area would be fitted very well. This is part of our how we have to create adaptations in a more creative way. Then we also conducted broader approach and methodologies. In our teams, we are coming from not only for educations, but in policy makers, public policy, and then the IT and software engineering. And the last will be capacity buildings. We learn each other. That's the important part. Because we learn each other, then we build our capacity to accept more approach or more concept from other disciplines. Okay, this is the part of the documentations of our projects. And I would like to please. Okay, if you are not. Okay, I will translate to you, especially to Professor Lucy. This is the area where our students are located. In the hill of the southern part of the West Java. Most of our students have mobile phone, but the connections
Melalui
is
program aplikasi
suffering
lokal
the
seluler
connections.
network di area blank spot, Desa Barusari, Kecamatan Pasirwangi, Kabupaten Garut menjadi daerah kedua sebagai daerah percontohan dalam program Buka Project bersama
So after the
PNI, PTJ,
pilot
LPPM,
testing,
Universitas
and then we
Terbuka.
installed our
Dengan adanya program ini diharapkan dapat melayani
UTCC
mahasiswa dan
infrastructure
lebih
in this
masyarakat
area.
untuk meningkatkan proses pembelajaran supaya lebih pintar, cerdas, dan bermanfaat. Terutama di Desa Barusari, Kecamatan Pasirwangi, Kabupaten Garut yang merupakan wilayah kerja Universitas Terbuka Bandung. Buka Project bersama LPPM Universitas Terbuka menjangkau yang tidak terjangkau.
Yeah. Okay, because this device is a portable, then whenever students, there is no longer students over there, then we can move to the other part of the group of students that require or need this device. In conclusions, I think a multidisciplinary research is essential for driving innovations and solving complex problems. By bringing together the experts from different fields, we can develop new technologies and solutions that have a significant impact on society. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you
so
everyone.
Thank you so much indeed, Professor Daryono, Professor of Law, Universitas Terbuka, and graduate from Australian National University, Australia, and also from Victoria University, Canada. Thank you so much indeed, Pak. Terima kasih, Professor. So henceforth, well, this is time for question and answer. But before we go ahead, I will read the procedure of question and answer. So, first of all, for your information, since we only more likely we have only limited time, this Q&A session will be in a maximum 25 minutes. And for all the questions that we've gathered, we will select only 3 questions in the first beginning and aided by questions if we still have a time available. So we apologize that not all the questions will be answered. And in particular, these questions are only applied to participants who attend offline. Sorry for not provide to online participants. And please, before raise the questions, mention your name, faculty, if any, or to whom you raise the question, so to whom you direct the questions. Meanwhile, you prepare the questions. Let me please, for all participants, to shoot and grab the QR code. So please, for IT, the IT staff, to provide the QR code on the screen. From Professor Sachiko. Okay, please, if you have raised the questions, please let me know. Okay, from the corner, the second row, yeah, the second row. I think from the Mr. who wear the batiks, yeah, first, and second from lady who wear the scarf, and from this right side, Ibu, yeah, thank you, Ibu who raised the hands, yeah, okay. Okay, please, Pak, if you want to have a questions, please, you can do there or on the stage. Okay, please, Pak.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Pak Martino, PhD. My name is Bahtiar from Graduate Studies. from graduate schools, Universitas Terbuka. My first questions is addressed to both speakers, and I'm sorry if a little bit sidetrack my questions because it's not directly related with your topics. But personally, I consider that this question is important for us. The first speaker explained about the three different model in research: multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and transdisciplinary. Personally, I'm interested with the difference between multidisciplinary and transdisciplinary. So maybe the two speakers can share with us, if you have an experience on that, what's the challenges and the benefit of implementing transdisciplinary in terms of or instead of multidisciplinary? Because both of you only explain about the multidisciplinary, and personally, I'm interested in transdisciplinary. That's the first question, and the second question is addressed to Prof. Daryono. Just now you presented the result from UNESCO Global Survey about top 4 global challenges for the future, especially in 2030, if I'm not mistaken. Climate change, violence and conflict, discrimination, and lack of food, water, and housing. And the fourth issues actually is not include education. My background is education, and personally I'm so interested in that. So maybe Prof. Daryono can share with us, based on your study that you have implemented about advancing equality and access to higher education by seeing the result from UNESCO survey. Yeah, is there any aspect that maybe we can plan for the future research related with education itself? Because based on the UNESCO survey result, education is not included in the top 4 challenges in the future. But personally for me, access and inequality in education actually is one of the biggest challenges for the future, including how to integrate technology in our daily activities. I guess so. Thank you very much.
Okay, for the first question, there's 3 different models as mentioned by Bahtiar, and he wants to know what the benefit of multidisciplinary and also transdisciplinary for the education. This is for Professor Sachiko, and then about the global survey, perhaps Professor Daryono can answer accordingly. So please, Professor Sachiko, to answer the questions.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. I think this question should be answered by Professor Tom because that was his topic. But let me try to just briefly comment. When I do the research with different multidisciplinary teams, I do not really think about whether this research is a transdisciplinary or interdisciplinary. When you start doing the research, it evolves around whether what type of researchers you have together. Maybe sometimes you will divide the work, which could be interdisciplinary. So you combine the results together and discuss, and then kind of evolve throughout the research. Maybe it is not merged from the beginning. But transdisciplinary research could be that you have a common understanding of the topic more closely, and then you are using probably the common methodology, like as he presented, like mixed methodology, rather than one is using a qualitative, the other is quantitative, and combine. There may be a division of labor in terms of the research team members, but so I think you can be flexible in thinking about whether you are doing a multi or transdisciplinary. I actually do not really think about whether my research is which category do I fit in. I think it is to help you understand whether this is to different approach and different disciplinary can fit into, so that you can understand the differences or understand the categories and then what type of research could fit into this type of research. So I'm not expert in that transdisciplinary itself, but maybe Pak Tom can later on add comments if he can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Probably Prof. Tom we will be send you the email for you to answer the question. But yeah, Prof. Daryono take into action to pass the mic to Professor Thomas. Okay, give applause to Professor Thomas. Okay, this is the multidisciplinary, so it's multiple action that we can do. Okay.
Thank you for your question. I think it's an excellent question. And as Professor Sachiko mentioned, I don't think researchers are always thinking about, is this interdisciplinary or is this transdisciplinary? And in fact, many researchers use those terms interchangeably without really recognizing what the difference is or if there is a difference. But if I were to say, what are the advantages of transdisciplinarity, I would say that it does involve developing a common methodology to examine a problem that doesn't fit neatly into any disciplinary category or box. Now, a disadvantage might be, I think you also asked about disadvantages of transdisciplinarity, is you might lose a little bit of your disciplinary identity. And many of us, most of us who are trained in academia are closely aligned with our disciplinary identities. So to the extent that you're really engaging in transdisciplinarity, you might feel a little lost or disoriented because you've lost a little bit of that disciplinary identity. So there are benefits, but there are also some drawbacks. And that's how I would think about your question. But thank you very much for your question.
Very much. Give an applause to Professor Tom.
Okay, thank you. I think I'm following Professor Tom because Professor Lucy already mentioned.
On the table, yes, sir. Thank you, okay. Professor.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, thank you for that. For great questions. When we are working together with quite many different fields in the tables, do you think we can divide it, whether we are going to have a multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary, or interdisciplinary? Sometimes, as Professor Lucy mentions, sometimes we are blurred. So it cannot divide it quite fit with the picture that Professor Lucy mentions. So the transdisciplinary, basically, that we think about our disciplines and working together, but in the table that we have to solve the problems, then we sometimes and we often thinking beyond our disciplines. That's my view. Probably it's wrong because I'm not quite. But this is part of my experience when I was a member of the working groups on developing a legal guide on contract farming. We are all coming from different backgrounds. Law, social science, and then political studies and everything. We need to solve and to create a legal guide to ensure that the legal farming in all of the developing nations have to be proper in a legal framework. Because we assume and the teams discover that the majority of the developing nations was not unable to secure the contract farming with the regulatory framework. So we are developing this one. So sometimes we are unable to see whether, because I'm a lawyer, we talk law. Because of the political science, we talk about politics. Sometimes we blur. This part of my understandings. So the second one about why the education is not mentioned in the UNESCO top global challenge in the 2030. The education, I think, is in the heart of that one. The 4 global challenges actually is in the heart of this top 4 global challenges is education. That's for my understandings. That's why the UNESCO does not quite state clearly education. No, because inequality is happen in educations. Climate change is happen also in education as well. So the education is in the heart of these four top global challenges in the 2030. I think that's my word.
Okay, thank you so much indeed, Professor. Now let's move on to the next questions. I think the second row from here, from the lady who wearing the scarf. Is it so? Sorry, from the second row, I think. No? Okay, let's move on to this in front, yeah, from, sorry, you can, Professor, from who wear batiks. Yeah, you can raise the questions on your place. Yeah, please pass mic for him. Yeah.
Morning, Professor Mita Sachiko. I have a question about, I'm Fira Nursyayuni from Bogor, UT Bogor, University Bogor, University Terbuka Bogor. I have a question about, has the current multidisciplinary approach been able to overcome barriers in integrating various disciplines, or are there still challenges that need to be addressed? And sorry, I'm from Faculty Communication Study. And I have question again. How does the involvement of various disciplines in the educational process influence critical thinking toward economic issues? Thank you.
Okay. Do you have any more questions? Okay, the next question, please.
Okay, let me introduce myself. My name is Mutiara Amalina Hairisa from Universitas Terbuka Jakarta, Agribusiness and Development Communication, Faculty of Science and Technology. So this actually about SDGs and women equality. As we know, women's empowerment is also essential for achieving social justice. Women and girls are often subject to discrimination, violence, and other forms of oppression simply because of their gender in several countries. Gender equality is central to the SDGs, and if it's not achieved, the implementation of all the goals will be compromised. And my simple question is, how to overcome gender inequality in women in your country? For Professor Mita Sachiko. Thank you, and that's all.
Okay, for the second question, I think Professor Sachiko, would you please to answer?
This is a very difficult and challenging question in itself. Thank you very much for the question, because as you might know, Japan as a global, gender equality index, we are out of 150 or so country, actually one of the, being even one of the OECD advanced countries, we are one of the bottom. So we have nothing really to really to be proud of about our gender equality, but there are some movement within a country, both in government side and from the private sector and on the ground. So there used to be a lot of gender inequality in terms of taking maternity leave. Now the companies are encouraged to take both the paternity and maternity. The paternity means that the father also should take equal leave when you have a very small children up to 1 year. So the percentage of take-up used to be less than 1%, let's say, in so-and-so big companies. But now the company as well as the government has the incentive to really promote both equality in childcare as well as taking the leave and then dividing the work between the gender. In terms of CEOs and the gender equality in the labor market, for another example, it also has been a very slow move compared to European or US or other OECD countries. We are trying to have this external CEO or invite many. Actually, companies are really, really trying hard. For those who are global already, they have a peer pressure outside Japan when they have a sub-quarter or headquarter outside Japan. They really have to standardize their gender equality or diversity, not only gender, but for like hiring minorities in the society. So we are slower than other OECD countries, and you raised a very valid and timely question that the government and the country and the people are trying really hard to work towards gender equality. And also I have also research in gender equality, which I am doing in a multidisciplinary research aspects, which I can share later on if you're interested. Thank you. I don't know if I was answering a question.
Thank you so much indeed, Professor Sachiko. And let me pass to Professor Daryono, if you may any answer to give it to the audience. This is not working.
Okay, I think, thank you for this quite enlightening questions for both of students. The first about the gender inequality. Yeah, that's a global problem actually. It's not only for Indonesia, and I think Professor Miyata has already mentioned about but the problem actually is not, it cannot be addressed in a common word. There have to be a specific locals and nations, because gender inequality is quite close to the culture, social and political dimensions. So these three aspects have to be approached in order to solve the gender inequality in a proper way. Because in gender inequality in Japan would be quite different from the Indonesia. For my assumptions, because gender inequality rooted in traditions and in historical perspective of the nations, so the intervention about rules or intervention about law, it doesn't work. So there have to be affirmative that some of the requirements that is obliged by the government, obliged by the corporations. So there need to be a kind of affirmative, what they call it, affirmative policy, affirmative actions that could be secured by, of course, secured by law. Okay, I think so that's good. Thank you.
So much gratitude, Professor. Now we give the opportunity for one last questions. I think Bapak from the mid row, yeah, in the middle. Please raise up, Pak. Yeah. Give applause to Bapak.
Thank you for this opportunity. I have three questions for each the two panelists and one keynote speaker, if I may. First one, my question goes to Professor Thomas Roche concerning the. We often notice that some researchers and large number of groups tend to have a strong ego of their own disciplines in terms of methodology. You might have an experience beforehand how to handle this kind of work or each group, its discipline has their own paradigms, approaches, method in terms of methodology, say quantitative or qualitative one, as mentioned, mixed method before. That's the first question. The second question goes to Professor Miyata. This is a very superficial question, actually. In terms of poverty, the United Nations SDGs is quite ambitious in terms of saying no poverty. But in my own background knowledge, poverty is identical to reducing, combating, eradicating, eliminating. If we can compare between developed and underdeveloped or developing countries, are there any great differences between level of poverty in terms of how to achieve is it possible to reduce it or to eradicate in some developing countries? Our own experience here in Indonesia is still quite a long way for us to solve this problem. And my third question goes to Prof. Dayon now. Thank you, Padar. Very interesting to remind us again about the BUCA project commissioning by the European Union. My question actually about, as you mentioned, communication, collaboration is very important, as Professor Thomas also mentioned. What about the aspects of sharing costs and sharing resources? Because in our previous project, it was financed mostly by the European Commission Union, but other small projects may require other support in terms of resources and event costs. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, from Bapak.
Oh, sorry. My name is Kennedy from the Faculty of Social Sciences.
Okay, Pak Kennedy. Pak Kennedy. Oh, Professor Kennedy. Okay, thank you so much, Professor. So the question, it goes to both of the speakers. And yeah, we have a limited time. Since we have a limited time, so this is last question for all. And please, Professor Sachiko first to address the questions.
Thank you very much for the question. It is actually a very big question as well, whether the world can eradicate the poverty as described, no poverty in the SDGs, or should we aim for reducing poverty, including what has been successfully done in Indonesia. My personal view, if the government has the right mindset, and then if that it has been like observed in Asian countries, if they follow the program that has been, including in Indonesia, you have done a tremendous community development program and also support the poor, the unprivileged remote areas to be able to have their own program and not just give money, directly. Then there is a gradual, step-by-step reduction, steadily shown in the poverty incidence, in the indicators. So I believe that if you have the right government and the right policy makers on the ground with teamwork, there is a way to, for example, reduce poverty substantially in some of the African countries. And I've seen my colleagues in African Development Bank when I was there trying to really work with the locals to aim for this target of reducing poverty. Used to be in Millennium Development Goals, it used to be half, right? It's not like zero. Zero is a very difficult target, but solving it, reducing the poverty to half has been reached in many countries around the globe. So I think it's manageable if you go step by step with the right government, that there is no, as you know, the corruption is still a very, very big issue in some unfortunate countries. But if you have a right mindset of teams and then the local collaboration, I think it is a manageable target, not to zero, but to continuously improve the indicator of to reduce the poverty. I hope I answer your question. Sure?
Okay, let me pass again to Professor Daryono, please.
Thank you. I think Professor Miyato is the expert of the poverty, so I think she's quite knowledgeable in poverty. So I think I would like to address the Pak Karnedi question related to the sharing costs and resources. Yes, one of the aims of our evaluations actually is about the sustainability. So the sustainability of the project have to be ensured on how and especially on how the project is sustainable. So a part of them we also discovering about whether the host of the school or even the governments, the local governments, may be able to allocate. It's quite actually it's not expensive. It's quite from the we call it as a bus. It is bus basic operate. I'm not sure what is BOS. I forgot. So there is there's part of our intention as well, Pak Karnedi, for keep the projects sustained. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Karnedi, again for the question, and give a big, huge applause to our speaker again. In prior, before we move ahead, I think this is last, because the time is so limited. Oh, Prof. Tom, okay, Prof. Tom, okay, still available time for a special Prof. Tom to end it all the session. Prof. Tom, can you use mic or?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you so much indeed.
I'll be very quick, I promise. Thank you for your question. So part of the problem of the disciplinary silos that I talked about are status differences in disciplinary hierarchies. And oftentimes any of us who have worked at a university know that certain disciplines have higher status than others. Those from higher status disciplines might not have an incentive to work with those from other disciplines, and those from disciplines that don't have the same perceived status might feel like they won't be treated fairly by those in other disciplines. So that's part of the problem of the inertia, disciplinary inertia, that I think can only be overcome by incentives to collaborate across disciplines through either grant funding or support with publications, or for these disciplinary researchers to see the benefit. So they have to actually engage in the collaboration to see the benefit that they gain in order to provide them an incentive to continue collaborating. So I think it's difficult because first you have to catalyze it, then you see the benefit, and from there it will feed on itself. So thank you for your question, and I think it's an important.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Tom. So much gratitude and grateful thanks to Professor Tom for addressing the question. So before we close down all this session, probably our speakers has close remarks for all the participants here. First of all, from Prof. Tom, do you have? Yeah, first our keynote speaker has a chance to say. Okay, Professor Tom, please. Okay, technical problems undergo. So, okay.
I did not expect to participate in the Q&A, but I'm glad that I was involved. It's been a true pleasure to discuss these important questions with my colleagues, and I look forward to the parallel sessions that come after to see what more we can learn about multidisciplinary research and practice. Thank you.
Okay, again, give a big applause to Professor Tom. So, we hear the remarks from our speakers. Please, Professor.
So thank you so much for this opportunity. And we are in a era of multidisciplinarity already many have mentioned, but I'm also very hopeful that you have a very challenging questions already in your mind that keep up with these questions, keep asking to people and then to yourself, and I'm really looking forward to the plenary sessions as well. Thank you.
Please, Prof. Daryono, you have a closing remark.
Okay, I think I would like to share you how to differentiate the gesture of the monodisciplinary scholars and the multidisciplinary scholars. The monodisciplinary scholars always looking down because they ignore any discipline. But for the multidisciplinary scholars, always looking forward because they want to see the whole world entirely. Okay, thank you everyone for the participations. And
please give applause to Prof. Daryono. So some of the notes that moderator will be conclude in the nutshell. This is a combination of multidisciplinary from various areas, and also from Prof. Daryono, there's digital revolution and integration of knowledge to solve a complex problem. So the highlights from this is using this multidisciplinary for solving the problems. And as a moderator, I apologize to all participants that the question is so prolific, so it's so many questions coming, and we can see again in the next, and maybe you can keep in touch with us through email or maybe in the next session of ICoMUS third session. Okay, thank you so much. And as always, we do hope that we as a committee, we would like to have a token of gratitude for our speakers. So please stand up, and we will present a token of appreciation from Research and Community Service Institution of LPPM, Ibu Profesor Dr. Andes Dewi Artati Patmo MA PhD to present it here in the stage for our speakers. Yeah. So this is conveyed by the MCs actually. So sorry, I have to pass to the Master of Ceremony, Ms. Trixia. Thank you, Ms. Trixia. Okay.
Thank you very much to our speakers and moderator for giving such an informative and comprehensive discussion. Please kindly stay on the stage because we would like to present a token of appreciation. And to present the token of appreciation, we would like to invite the Head of Institute of Research and Community Services, Professor Dewi Artati Patmoputri, as well as the Head of Research and Scientific Center, and also the Chairman of the Organizing Committee. A token of appreciation first will be given to Professor Sachiko. And also the certificate to Professor Sachiko. Next, we will have a souvenir for Professor Sachiko. Next up will be a token of appreciation to Professor Daryono. We will now have a photo session together. Please kindly move forward. Okay, please give your best smile. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. You may please return to your seat. Once again, thank you very much to our speakers and also moderator for giving such an extraordinary discussion session. Now, distinguished guests, presenters, participants, ladies and gentlemen, after a morning filled with knowledge and inspiration, it's time to refuel and network during the lunch break. Your lunch break will be served at the back of this room. On my right side is the lunch for our students from Universitas Terbuka, and on my left it's the lunch for our guests. And please return promptly after the lunch break, and we will have continue with the parallel session. The parallel session will begin at 1:15 p.m. So please enjoy your lunch, and we will back here at 1:15 p.m. Thank you very much once again, and have a great lunch.
Thank you.